12 or Epiq Thursdays. We are live with a special guest this time from Kansas. I'm going to introduce him in a second. Brendan Vermeire. He's a functional medicine expert. He's going to talk about things that relate to the 10% that's going to help you disrupt your own health, obviously in a positive way. But before we get there, a couple of things kind of just to give people perspective in case you're watching Epiq Thursdays for the first time. This is our weekly show on Facebook where we talk about all things to do with health, wellness, longevity, biohacking that can help someone get to that next level in their life as an entrepreneur, as a change maker, as a senior decision maker in your community, in your business, or in your family. And we're trying to talk to people from across the globe in 20 minutes, distill the wisdom, do a cheat sheet if we have to. I know that we can't do hacks all the time, as I'm sure Brendan will testify later. But what are those things that we can do that are protocols, those habits, and ideas that can help us improve things very quickly after watching the show? 1, 2, or 3 things you can make by way of action, inspired action, so the speakers give you perspectives and you go and do the work, because at the end of it, we can only give you ideas. The hard work has to come from your side. So now Brendan, so why am I having Brendan? Well, he's special, and he's special for many reasons, but let me give you a perspective on his background. He's a functional medicine consultant. He's board certified holistic health practitioner. He's a master nutrition coach, master personal trainer, USAW sports performance coach, and a CrossFit certified trainer. Now, he began his career as a personal trainer and nutrition coach at the age of 19 after being medically discharged from the US Navy SEAL training due to an injury. But after that, he began pursuing a career path which has led him to be widely regarded as one of the leading experts in the US in metabolic health and holistic education. So he's done many things. I mean, he has some, I would say, fun facts. One thing I would say is not fun, but tells you that how he's a resilient guy. He's almost died at the age of 22 from an intentional antidepressant overdose. And he's also started his career, as he said, scrubbing toilets at the gym. So he's done it the hard way. He's a hard worker. He's committed. And I'm glad to have him on the show. Brendan, welcome with that. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me, Aman. It's obviously an honor and a pleasure to get to do this type of stuff to, spread experience, spread good education, at least spread some positivity that can help empower people. So thank you.
Wonderful. So Brendan, you're in Kansas. I'd love to know a bit more about, your journey. I know that you have kind of done it the hard way, as I've just kind of shared, but what would be some interesting highlights maybe in the next couple of minutes, just so that people understand, who is Brendan? And why, have you kind of chosen this path?
Yeah, for the past few years, I've gotten a lot of questions as my career has developed. People like close family members and friends ask me, like, what is it that you even do anymore? I know you used to be like a personal trainer, but like, I don't get it. Because functional medicine, holistic health is this rapidly kind of exploding, emerging paradigm rather than a methodology. So kind of my tagline I came up with is, I'm just a boy from Kansas out to save the world from chronic disease. And it's just a fun way to respond to it, because ultimately that's it. Like I'm a boy that was raised here in Kansas. I went through my own healing crisis and kind of self-healing journey. And what started as actually scrubbing toilets at a gym. And then here we are over a decade later. And I travel around the nation lecturing to doctors about complicated, functional medicine subjects. So, I've climbed that ladder one step at a time. And I think the fun fact is I'm just a regular guy, and anybody can do this work if they put in the time. Anybody can heal themselves if they know where to look and know how to think and can work through stuff honestly, layer by layer. So it's been a beautiful journey, and to be able to share that is really just an honor.
So let's begin perhaps then by understanding, there are some, you work with a lot of people with metabolic conditions, etc. And, I'm kind of obviously signing in today from Dubai, and this region in particular has a pretty, I would say, high incidence of diabetes and even heart disease for that matter, which I guess is similar now in many other places which have affluent lifestyles. So I'm wondering, when you look at that sort of overall scene and perspective and landscape, what are the things that you find are happening, and what are you suggesting to your clients and to people you work with, or you kind of, speak on platforms, are things they should be looking out for to help themselves? I mean, I love the quote, by the way. I think we should let others see it as well. The greatest medicine for all is to teach people how not to need it, right? So Brendan and Aman are not here to teach you something which you cannot accomplish yourself.
Yes, exactly. And that's the thing, like with the circumstances that 2020 has brought, shall we say, there's been a lot of talk about, germ theory, and there's been a lot of talk about, Well, even more recently, now our government over here is starting to admit, hey guys, it seems that any sort of metabolic disorder, metabolic syndrome, kind of chronic disease comorbidity really increases the risk of infectious disease, which, I would like to think that that should be relatively obvious, but maybe it's not. And I think Americans are kind of starting to wake up with like, wait a second, you mean this chronic disease inducing lifestyle that we're all living might make us more susceptible to some sort of infection. So I think it's really important for people to understand, we are living in this more modern era where it is our environment and our lifestyle that's really driving the chronic conditions, the diabetes, the cardiovascular, the neurodegenerative, and also depression and mental illness, so to speak, which is obviously a huge area of passion for me, because we now really see through the literature, whether it's depression, whether it's neurodegenerative, whether it's cardiovascular, diabetes, so on and so forth, it's really a matter of chronic inflammation. So then we have to kind of start deconstructing, well, what really drives this low-grade, subclinical, chronic, long-term inflammation that kind of cooks our body from the inside out? And it's really the lifestyle. So I think it's helpful for people to understand, when I'm consulting with clients, whether that's America or I do consult internationally, I kind of group people into two standard buckets of, well, it's either that 80 to 90%, which is really just more lifestyle behavior induced, in which case we really need to focus on the sleep, the stress management, the diet, the exercise and activity, huge emphasis on stress reduction, stress management. And then there is about a 10 to 20% that there's something a little bit more complicated that we have to go digging for. But really the equation of health doesn't need to be quite so nuanced or complicated, because it is fundamentally an environmental and lifestyle induced chronic disease pandemic, so to speak.
Now, there's a phrase I heard that, there are some conditions, diabetes is one of them, for example, where it's death by 1,000 cuts, right? You don't start feeling it, it's slowly cutting away in your body, kind of, as you said, this is chronic sub-level, you don't feel it until it shows up, because there's an infectious condition around you and you are far more prone to it because your body is not able to kind of deal with the barrage of attacks that are coming in. So I think it'd be useful for us to understand, when you look at these things, there's the basics, I suppose, good lifestyle, nutrition, sleep, etc., keep your body moving most of the time. Is there anything else or why isn't that so obvious to people, I guess, is the first question. I mean, that seems rather, we read about it, we understand that's true, but why are people not getting it? Or are they getting it now? Or is it still a case of fighting a losing battle?
What's kind of interesting about that is I find at times, because we live in the age of information, we all are tapping into the internet and kind of this matrix reality and, being flooded by all of this information that we're trying to process. But if we really zoom out and look at it from more of a systems biology perspective, it's not quite so complicated, because we're at this very pivotal moment in human existence where we've never been so disconnected from our primal natural roots, and we're so disconnected from nature. We don't live a lifestyle that in any way resembles the lifestyle that we evolved through for hundreds of thousands of years. So ultimately, what's really cool about the scientific literature these days is all this new emerging scientific evidence of, the microbiome or toxins or whatever it is. It really is just pointing us back to, guys, you need to get back to nature. You need to get back to a lifestyle of eating whole food and resting more, not being so high speed all the time. If you look at animals in the wild, they spend the majority of their day sleeping and playing and relaxing, whereas humans, we've disconnected from the natural world and created this pseudo lifestyle of go, 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 accomplish, and all the while not eating real food, not experiencing nature. So we really need to kind of get back to a more primal lifestyle as the foundation of our health, and then we can more easily navigate that 10%.
So one of the things that I've been studying and getting certified on in the past few months is the whole idea of helping people get into flow states, so they can kind of get into high states of peak performance. And one of that, the flow triggers, being in nature, is obviously that because your body is far more relaxed, you're connected with the environment, as you said, and getting the signals. So as we look at this desire to get stuff done in the entrepreneur mindset, perhaps, where they're on deadlines, they have to deliver results for either their shareholders or for their customers or for their team members. Yet at the same time, they have to find time to disconnect and recharge and recover and all. How does one think of this from a balance perspective, right? Because is there no balance, or is it just a case of chunking time out during the week or during the day and saying, you know what, that's my recovery time. I have to kind of complete my sort of cycle. And if I don't do that, I'm going to get back on the wagon wheel and I'm not going to be as effective.
Right. Well, see, that's what makes it complicated is we're at this point that we've never been at before, where we actually have to make the deliberate, conscious decision to live a more natural kind of primal lifestyle, if you will, where, you know, we didn't have to used to make that decision because that's just how it was. That's the world we were born into. Whereas now we're kind of being pulled and almost like seduced by this more modern technological way of living. So we actually have to make the deliberate effort of carving out that time. But ultimately, I think it really starts with being just more mindful, right? And this is where all these different technological apps, whatever it is, of your HRV score or your, you know, Fitbit telling you how many steps you got, well, that's where we're at. So whatever it takes to basically have this external signal that prompts us of, hey, I need to pay a little bit more attention to, like, what am I really feeling right now? How am I feeling? And I think we're just so go, go, go and just chasing our goals or building the business. I'm an entrepreneur myself, obviously. So we have to make that deliberate, conscious decision to put our health first, or at least higher on that priority, and actually tune into what is my body trying to tell me right now? Because the body's always trying to communicate with us. It's just how much are we listening versus just full speed ahead. So that's where those gadgets and different metrics can help us kind of tap back into. But ultimately, it starts with mindfulness, right? So whatever it takes to prompt that mindfulness.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, on a personal reflection, for the last 2 nights, including the last 3 nights, my HRV scores had tanked. I mean, like, they were really poor, and, you know, I wear a Whoop device, so I was getting a very low score for readiness. I'm like, okay, this hasn't happened in the past, and there must be something that's causing it. I kind of tried to isolate what was the trigger for it and what could be done to change it. And it, you know, as you said, you are getting signals all the time. You just have to choose to listen to them or to kind of figure out, what does that really mean? Are you kind of stopping to feel your energy, your body's heart rate, and etc. So yeah, you're absolutely right. I, you know, I guess I testify to that myself, especially in the past few days. You know, you spoke of the other 10%. I mean, is that like connected to testing, whether it's the microbiome? Is there anything else to it? I mean, maybe a few words on that as well would be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, it's like when I'm consulting with a new client or prospect client, I have a questionnaire that I created because I'm trying to distinguish between, this is more just the standard modern metabolism, if you will, of, okay, the chronic inflammation, the more lifestyle and behavior induced, which a lot of times some of that is, you know, subclinical. It takes a long time before somebody's really going to be diagnosed with, well, you actually are type 2 diabetes, or, you know, you do have a autoimmune condition or whatever. You know, those chronic conditions, it takes years, if not decades, to really manifest at the clinical, medical, kind of conventional level. And so we're really dealing with populations of millions of people around the earth that are kind of in the subclinical, where it's like they're cooking and they're on their way to that, but it hasn't fully manifested. And so they're really just experiencing this, again, subclinical level of like metabolic dysfunction. All the systems of the body are just not working optimally because it's not getting what it needs. But then there is that other 10% that, hey, you know, they might have actually, whether it's genetic susceptibility, you know, they had the genetic predisposition for an autoimmune condition or something a little bit more severe. Now, certainly that 90% equation is going to increase that susceptibility like we've been talking about. But that 10% is stuff like, you know, I'll use the word or phrase stealth infections or different types of toxins. So I think about things like, you know, Lyme disease and borreliosis, where they got bit by a blood-sucking insect and they, you know, took in a bacteria, their immune system couldn't fully, you know, knock it out. And so it creates this cytokine storm, as they call it in the research, where one of my big areas of focus is mold illness. You know, we all know about mold and water damage to the home. But I think it's very overlooked, and it's actually a major cause of all sorts of conditions, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, neurodegenerative. So thinking about microbes and toxins. So it's almost like, you know, germ theory isn't 100% wrong. It's just very incomplete. It's kind of like the difference of, you know, clinical diagnosable type 2 diabetes versus that subclinical insulin resistance that's developing for years. And so I think we have to, especially in the functional medicine world, we're a little bit more sensitive of looking for kind of that subclinical area where maybe that full-blown disease state hasn't manifested quite yet, but we need to be looking for what things are stimulating, you know, that physiology or pathophysiology. So again, it's kind of looking almost at with the stealth infections of the toxins, so mold and glyphosate, Lyme disease, microbiome disturbances, which have been linked to virtually all chronic diseases. So that's a huge thing, is we're starting to see, you know, we have created this very sterile and yet toxic world that we're all sort of cooking in, right? And so we really have to be able to navigate that. And that's where testing and stuff can help a bit.
So what tests would you recommend if someone's just starting out on this sort of self-discovery, and, you know, are there like certain batteries or panels you should suggest they should kind of at least begin with to get some sort of early sort of perspectives on what's happening inside their body?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the main thing that I do professionally is teaching professionals, practitioners on how to use lab testing effectively. Because I will admit, you know, in my industry these days, there's new lab tests popping up left and right. And I think at times it can be very misleading. I think at times, you know, functional medicine is better in theory than application. I think sometimes it's easier to create problems than solve them. And so this is where, at the end of the day, the most scientifically validated, reliable testing that we have is the good old-fashioned blood work that we would do through conventional healthcare for routine health monitoring anyways. But I think it's, you know, whereas conventional medicine looks at that blood work from a very, you know, disease diagnostic purpose of, if something's not extremely high, they're really not going to pay attention to it. Whereas if we can look at it more through that functional holistic lens and see how, oh, actually your liver enzymes have been creeping up year by year for the past 10 years, or, you know, your glucose markers, so whatever it is. So I really think that good old-fashioned blood work should be the foundation of everything we're doing. But then some of these functional tests can be helpful to screen for something, such as if somebody does have mold toxicity, well, you can't really see that clearly reflected in blood chemistry. But if you know, do some sort of urine or blood mycotoxin test where it's actually looking at the toxins from the mold, from the environment that go into our body, well, then it's like, hey, you know, you have excess levels of these toxins. How is that affecting your physiology? So I think the most important thing for people to understand, these functional tests are helpful. We have to be careful about not letting a piece of paper convince you that you're ill when maybe you're actually not. So that's where the blood work is really the foundation of our physiology.
Got it. And so again, so let's say they've done the testing now, they're sort of getting a sense that, okay, some things need to be addressed. And of course, it's going to be specific for everyone. What would you kind of say are certain base conditions for people to kind of keep in mind, or at least keep track of, regardless of whatever else shows up on their panel? Like if they do these sort of basic hygiene, like table stakes, this will help them with their immunity, their sense of energy, how they show up for life. And I guess overall confidence, right? And that they feel that, look, I can do something. I can actually kind of create impact in the world around me.
Yeah, you know, so with like the 90%, the masses, you see just a lot of the same compilation of symptoms, whether it's a little bit of fatigue or a little bit achy, a little bit of cognitive dissonance or dysfunction. But it doesn't really rear its ugly head. So you see the people that are super overweight, especially in America or whatever it is. But then that 10%, that's where, you know, things like really chronic fatigue, like debilitating fatigue, you can't get anything done. I think, honestly, I think mental health and cognition is probably one of the most sensitive kind of signals that something is a little bit off internally, you know, that we can get in, not today, but all the science of what causes cognitive dissonance, depression, anxiety, brain fog. I think the cognitive symptoms are some of the most sensitive of, hey, there is something going on internally that's causing this. So when I see really bad body pain, really bad fatigue, really bad sort of cognitive depression, anxiety, that's really telling us there's something that's a little bit more pronounced that we should probably start sorting out. But again, that's building upon that foundation of, if the fundamentals of the lifestyle are not in place, it doesn't really make sense to get too down the rabbit hole, because you see that a lot in the functional medicine space. People would rather do all the testing and do all the supplements and all the experimental therapies, everything before like looking inwards and doing some introspection and working on the behavior modification of a health promoting lifestyle. So that always has to be first.
Got it. Yeah. So stick to the basics. Let's not get too carried away with the fancy stuff, I guess, is the message, right?
Exactly.
So Brendan, I guess as we wrap up, what are the best places people can get hold of you or learn more about you? Our website, Instagram, what's the kind of best source of information?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. We're big on Instagram, so it's at the Holistic Savage, which is just kind of my that's my podcast and a little bit of a fun name. But then we have our website, metabolicsolutions.llc.com, and we're not too hard to find on the internet, but we consult with people around the world, clients, professionals, so on and so forth. So yeah, lots of good information.
All right. Well, we'll drop those details in our sort of show notes and comments later on. And I guess as a final thing, is there, well, a couple of things really. One is there something you would have wanted me to ask you that I have not been able to ask you because of my, I guess, professional incompetence on being a show host?
Oh, yeah, I think it was a great conversation, but I will say it all starts with the self. I think a lot of times, I just posted on social media about this today, actually. I think we're always looking externally when the answers are always internal. So I think creating the time, creating the space, holding a safe space for ourselves to get vulnerable a little bit and look within. A lot of times we kind of want to bypass some of those inner emotional turmoils. And so I always like to say the physiology follows the psychology. So we really have to get the behaviors, the belief system, the outlook, in alignment with your goals. A lot of times people are chasing a goal of weight loss or chasing a goal of getting off medication, but it really starts of they need to address why and really start looking within. And that's where the real answers are going to be. Got it.
Makes sense. All right. Well, final thing I would say is, and we typically request our guests to suggest what kind of challenge of some sort can a viewer put themselves through, not in, I guess, in a gimmicky sense, but something that would help them really, get started in this process, because they need some sort of structure or, I guess, process to get going. So if, whether it's spending a minute to reflect on how the day went, as simple as that, whether it's a minute of breath work, what are things that you do personally that you think may be good practice for someone to emulate in their daily lives and kind of get started do that for, let's say, next a week, 2 weeks, months, and longer, I guess, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't do it a whole lot anymore, but one of the most valuable things that I did when I was trying to navigate my own health issues, especially around chronic depression, was some type of journaling, which, some people that might be writing out all of your thoughts, and that's great. For me, it was a little bit more based around symptoms. I was really trying to look for correlation of, hey, I've been experimenting with my diet. I've been avoiding gluten for the past 6 weeks. I ate this and I noticed that. So it's a tool to help develop some mindfulness and get back in tune with our body. Our body is very intelligent. It's trying to communicate, but we have to train how to listen. So I think writing out, what are you doing with your lifestyle? How much water, what food, or how was your sleep? And writing down, like, how did that make you feel? Because then you can start seeing the patterns, the correlations. Wow, this really seems to, I wake up in the morning feeling so much better. So I think health journaling is one of the most important things we can do when we're first getting started.
Brilliant. Health journaling. I think I'm going to consider that, but I do journal, but I'm going to do the health. I kind of do a combo with that. So I think that's the interesting kind of, get those data points, some changes in your daily habits and routines. All right, everyone. Thank you again, Brendan, for joining us all the way from Kansas. It's been a pleasure having you on the show. We look forward to kind of staying in touch with you, and everyone who was watching and who will watch this afterwards as well. Go and get some action in the world done with all these sort of great ideas that Brendan has shared. So everyone, time out. See you next time. All the best.
Thank you so much.